The mysterious city of Machu Picchu is no longer occupied. It's been empty for nearly half a millennium. We began to see within this the outline of a doorway, and we're talking about ultimately being able to recover the power that Pachacutec possessed. There is something buried beneath Machu Picchu that was never supposed to be found. Not by tourists, not by historians, not by anyone. For 500 years it sat hidden, under the terraces, under the temples, under the postcard views that millions photograph every year, and nobody had a clue. Then between 2023 and 2025, 3 separate teams of scientists using DNA extraction, lidar scanning, and satellite imaging accidentally triggered a discovery that rewrote everything we thought we knew about this place. What they found beneath the surface was not just older than expected, or bigger than expected. It was something that should not exist at all. And here is what makes this story dangerous. Within weeks of the findings going public, the Peruvian government made a move that makes no sense. Unless what is buried beneath Machu Picchu is worth more hidden than understood. This is the discovery no one saw coming, and no one was prepared for. What happened next? The bones that changed everything. 2. Understand what is buried beneath Machu Picchu. We have to go back 1 year, earlier, to a genetics lab at Yale, where a bioarchaeologist named Dr. Lucy Salazar had just received results that made her call her colleague at 2 o'clock in the morning. For months, Salazar and geneticist Dr. Richard Berger had been leading an effort to extract and sequence the DNA of 34 individuals buried within the walls of Machu Picchu. Not random bones found in rubble. These were carefully placed burials positioned in deliberate locations throughout the citadel over centuries. The study was supposed to be straightforward. Genetic census confirming what most scholars believed, that Machu Picchu was a royal estate for the Inca emperor. Pachacutec, a retreat in the clouds for the most powerful man in South America. When the Spanish conquistadors invaded the Inca Empire in 1532, they only had a tiny army of 130 infantry and 40 cavalry. But here is the thing, the data did not cooperate. The DNA profiles of those 34 individuals did not align with standard Inca highland populations, not even close. The genetic diversity was staggering. People from completely different ethnic backgrounds, different regions, different linguistic groups, all interred together in one place. Some carried markers from coastal populations hundreds of miles to the west, others traced to groups far to the north. Dr. Berger later described the findings as unlike anything they had anticipated. The picture forming on their screens looked nothing like a royal retreat. This was something else entirely, something far more complex and far more deliberate than anyone had imagined. And then Salazar found the 6 women, 6 female remains buried among the others carried DNA that traced not to the Andes Mountains, but to the Amazon rainforest. Lowland jungle people, found at 2,440 m altitude in the clouds, at a site supposedly reserved for Inca royalty. I need you to picture the distance here. The Amazon basin and Machu Picchu are separated by some of the most geography on the planet. You start in dense, sweltering jungle at near sea level, humidity so thick you can taste it. Then you climb through cloud forest up vertical mountain passes, where the trails are barely wider than your shoulders. Freezing altitudes where the air thins until your lungs burn. The temperature drops 40 degrees in a single day. The terrain shifts from mud to ice to exposed rock face. Modern hikers with satellite phones and Gore-Tex gear still die on routes like these. And somehow, 500 years ago, these women made that journey or were made to make it. One pair stopped Salazar cold, a mother and daughter buried near each other. When the team analyzed the isotopes locked in their bones, the chemistry told 2 completely different life stories. The mother's bones carried one dietary and geographic signature. The daughters carried another. They had lived in different places at different times of their lives, different diets, different water sources, different worlds. The mother had grown up eating the foods of one region, breathing its air, drinking from its rivers. The daughter had done the same somewhere else entirely. Two women connected by blood, separated by geography, and then reunited in death. At 2,440 meters in a citadel nobody was supposed to question. Salazar sat with those results for a long time before she wrote anything down. This was not random migration. This was orchestrated, deliberate. These women were brought to Machu Picchu on purpose, transported hundreds of miles through some of the most punishing terrain on Earth. Someone decided they needed to be here. Someone with the authority to move people across an empire like pieces on a board. The question that nobody in the Peruvian government wanted to touch was brutally simple. Why? Why bring Amazonian women to a mountain fortress in the sky? What role did they play in what is their presence tell us about what Machu Picchu actually was? But that was not even the strangest part, because while Salazar and Berger were analyzing bones in New Haven, someone else was already scanning from the sky. And what they found made the DNA look like a footnote. What the lasers found. In 2024, Ari Karamanica and a team of remote sensing specialists flew lidar-equipped drones over sections of Machu Picchu that no tourist has ever set foot on. Lidar fires millions of laser pulses at the ground and builds three-dimensional maps of what lies beneath vegetation, soil, even shallow rock. It strips away the jungle like peeling skin off a body. It sees what human eyes cannot. The drones swept across dense forested slopes surrounding the famous terraces and temples, areas that had been classified for decades as natural wilderness, untouched jungle, framing a known site. Nothing to see. Here, 12 structures. That is what appeared on Karamanica's screen. 12 previously unknown buildings and platforms hidden beneath centuries of jungle growth. Structures that had never appeared on any map, any survey, any archaeological record in 500 years of exploration. Some showed the telltale signatures of ceremonial platforms. Others looked residential, administrative. The point is not what they were. The point is they were there. They had always been there, and nobody knew. Here is the catch. The areas where these structures were found are restricted zones. Tourists do not go there. Most researchers do not go there. These are sections controlled by the Peruvian government, off limits for decades. Nobody has publicly explained why these zones were restricted in the first place, or why scanning them was never a priority. 12 buildings hidden for 5 centuries, found in weeks, in areas nobody was allowed to look. Areas the Peruvian government had kept sealed while, as we would later learn, quietly reviving plans to flood this entire valley with 8 million tourists a month. Year. And if 12 structures were hiding just outside the known boundaries, how many more were sitting in the surrounding valleys? How large was the original complex? Were we looking at an asterisk? Single citadel, or the visible center of something much, much bigger? Keep that question in mind, because the next discovery made it worse. The Impossible X. In 2025, a geologist named Dr. Rualdo Menegat at the Federal University of Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil was analyzing satellite imagery when he noticed something in the geological data beneath Machu Picchu that made him rerun his models 3 times before he believed it. 2 major fault lines, each stretching approximately 175 kilometers, crossed directly beneath the citadel. Not near it, not close to it, directly under it, forming a perfect X. The intersection point sits almost exactly where the main temple complex stands. Now, fault lines mean one thing to most people: instability, earthquakes, collapse. But when Menegat and his team ran computer simulations, over 1,000 earthquake scenarios across every conceivable magnitude and direction, the results broke every expectation they had. Every single simulation showed the same outcome. The intersection of those 2 fault lines is extraordinarily stable. The opposing tectonics forces essentially cancel each other out, creating a geological sweet spot where the ground barely moves even during significant seismic events. And that pattern of silence is going to matter a lot more in a few minutes, because the geological surprise connected to something engineers had been quietly documenting for years, something buried even deeper. The city beneath the city. When modern engineers began studying Machu Picchu's construction in detail, they made a discovery that still has not fully sunk in for most people. What tourists photograph, the terraces, the temples, the iconic postcard views, represents roughly 40% of the actual engineering, maybe less. 60% of Machu Picchu exists underground. Let that land. More than half of one of the most famous archaeological sites on the planet is invisible, buried beneath your feet when you stand at that famous viewpoint. When excavation teams dug 9 feet beneath the visible terraces, they found an elaborate subterranean infrastructure, drainage systems, foundation networks, retaining walls, water channels carved from stone. An entire hidden city of engineering beneath the one the whole world thinks it knows. The terraces tourists admire are not just agricultural platforms. They are the visible tips of a massive system that manages water flow, prevents erosion, and stabilizes the mountain itself against the very earthquakes those fault lines should be producing. Strip away the postcard, and you find layer after layer of invisible genius. The drainage network alone would be impressive by modern civil engineering standards. Water entering at the highest point is channeled through stone-lined conduits, redistributed across dozens of terraces, filtered through carefully graded gravel layers, and expelled at the base of the mountain in controlled streams. Zero pooling, zero erosion, zero structural failure for 500 years. Through monsoon seasons, earthquakes, and centuries of neglect after the Inca Empire collapsed, this invisible infrastructure was built without iron tools, without wheels, without mortar between the precisely fitted stones, and it still functions right now. As you are watching this, ancient Inca drainage systems are managing rainfall on a Peruvian mountain more efficiently than most modern cities manage their stormwater. Engineers who have studied the system say it rivals anything built in the last century. Some say it surpasses it. But here is the deal. The precision did not stop underground. At the highest point of Machu Picchu sits a carved granite pillar called the Intihuatana. The name translates to the place where the sun is tied. For decades, archaeologists treated it as ceremonial decoration, a ritual object, interesting, but not functional, something to photograph and move past. Then someone decided to actually measure it precisely with GPS satellites. And what they found changed the conversation entirely. 3 degrees. The Intihuatana stone is aligned within 3 degrees of true north, not magnetic north, which wanders over time and shifts with the centuries, true geographic north, the actual rotational pole of the planet. This single carved stone functions as a solar calendar, marking solstices and equinoxes to within 15 minutes of accuracy, year after year, century after century. No adjustment, no recalibration, no maintenance of any kind. The level of astronomical precision encoded in this one piece of granite matches standards used today for modern satellite calibration 500 years ago. At 2,440 meters, carved with hand tools from raw granite by people who supposedly had no telescopes, no precision instruments, no advanced mathematics that we know of. So, hold all of that in your head at once. Earthquake-proof placement on an invisible geological X. 60% of the site still buried underground. 12 unknown structures found in restricted zones. DNA, evidence of a deliberately assembled multi-ethnic population from across an entire empire. And astronomical alignment that rivals modern technology. The question nobody wants to ask out loud is the obvious one. How much of Machu Picchu has actually been discovered? 10%? 20? What else is buried beneath that mountain? If you are connecting the same dots I am, you already know this does not add up. Subscribe to Stellar Insights. I cover the discoveries and the decisions behind them every week, because what happens next is where the timeline breaks. 3 weeks from protection to destruction, January 2026. Peru's Ministry of Culture approves a master plan for Machu Picchu's protection. Conservation guidelines, visitor management, preservation. Goals extending to 2046. 20 years of careful stewardship. On paper, exactly what every scientist had been demanding. 3 weeks later, February 2026, Peru greenlights the Chinchero International Airport. 3 weeks from protected to flooded. Now, hints of this had been building for years, even as lidar was scanning restricted zones, even as Menegat was publishing geological findings. The Peruvian government was quietly reviving an airport project that had been dead for 15 years. Corruption investigations tied to Brazilian construction giant Odebrecht had frozen the contracts. Billions vanished into bribes across 12 countries. Presidents fell. Officials went to prison. The Chinchero Airport was buried in that wreckage. But in early 2026, the project did not just come back. It was fast-tracked. Target, operational by late 2027. 18 months from approval to planes landing. Projected capacity, 8 million visitors per year. That is roughly 200% above current levels, funneled through a valley already failing on infrastructure, water, and waste, and the runway being built directly on top of 600-year-old Inca agricultural terraces in Chinchero. These are not ruins. These are functioning terraces, 6 centuries old and still working. The irrigation flows. The drainage performs. The structural engineering holds without a single repair. Same engineering tradition that built the underground systems beneath Machu Picchu. Same construction techniques. Same impossible precision. But here is the detail that should stop you cold. The capacity study, the official report determining whether the region can sustainably handle 8 million visitors, is not due until September 2026. 7 months after the airport was approved. They approved the airport before the study that determines whether the airport should exist. The report will come in September. It will almost certainly confirm what every single independent assessment has already concluded. The Sacred Valley simply cannot support that volume. Water systems, roads, waste management, archaeological preservation, absolutely none of it scales. And the airport will open anyway. The decision was made before the data existed. 8 million tourists per year generates revenue at every level. Airlines, hotels, transport, concessions, taxes. That money does not flow to archaeologists. It does not fund preservation. It flows to the same networks that have controlled Peruvian infrastructure contracts for decades. Follow the money. It always tells you who benefits and who decides. And the scientists? They have not been quiet. Dr. Salazar, researchers from Cambridge, Japanese archaeological institutions. They have all published warnings. The foot traffic, vibration, moisture, and construction associated with mass tourism at this scale pose direct, measurable threats to the underground infrastructure that has survived 500 years. Peru's response: silence. No rebuttals, no counter-arguments, no engagement with a single data point. Just silence and a construction timeline. One side has peer-reviewed research, DNA evidence, lidar mapping, geological modeling, and 5 centuries of a structural proof. The other side has revenue projections and a runway blueprint. And the terraces they are about to pave over? Once those are gone, the living laboratory for understanding how Machu Picchu's underground systems were built is gone with them, permanently. What they do not want studied. So, here is where we are, and I need you to hear this clearly. Scientists spent 5 years peeling back what Machu Picchu really is. Not a vacation palace for an emperor, not a ceremonial retreat, a deliberately engineered nerve center of an empire. Genetically diverse, geologically perfect, built on an invisible X that we needed satellites to find. 60% buried underground, aligned to the stars within 3 degrees. A site so precisely constructed that its plumbing still works after 5 centuries. And its foundations shrug off earthquakes that have flattened modern cities built with steel and concrete. And now, after every scan revealed how impossibly complex it is, after every study proved how fragile the ecosystem around it is, after every piece of evidence pointed towards something far more significant than a tourist destination, Peru is racing to open the floodgates. Not carefully, not gradually, in 18 months flat. The capacity report arrives September 2026. The airport opens late 2027. But here is the question that will not let go, and I am going to say it because nobody else will. What if this is not about tourism at all? What if the scans revealed something that certain people do not want carefully, publicly, independently studied? What if what is underground, what is hiding in those restricted zones, what those 12 structures actually contain, is more valuable controlled than understood? What if someone looked at that data and saw not a heritage site, but an asset? I am not saying conspiracy. I am saying the timeline makes no sense unless you factor in what these discoveries threaten. 15 years of nothing. Dead silence. Not a single shovel in the ground. Then 5 years of revelations that prove the site is orders of magnitude more significant and more fragile than anyone understood. And suddenly, urgently, an airport project that sat dead for a decade and a half has to be finished in 18 months. Right after scientists proved there is far more buried beneath that mountain than anyone realized. Right after the data showed we have only scratched the surface of what is down there. Dr. Menegat published the Geological X, Silence from Lima. Caramanica's lidar found 12 structures in restricted zones, silence. Salazar's DNA shattered the royal retreat theory and proved Machu Picchu was a deliberately assembled multi-ethnic hub of imperial power, silence. And then, 3 weeks after signing a 20-year protection plan, the bulldozers got the green light. September 2026, the capacity report drops. Will it change anything? Or was the decision cemented years ago in rooms where money talks louder than 5 centuries of proof? Subscribe to Stellar Insights because this story is accelerating faster than anyone expected. And something tells me we have not seen the worst of it yet. The countdown is on. And Machu Picchu, the impossible city built on the impossible X with more than half its secrets, still buried in the dark beneath a mountain that was never supposed to give them up, is running out of time.